6 months later, Sarah stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council, facing representatives from over 200 species. The massive chamber hummed with tension as delegates whispered in dozens of languages, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of uncertainty and fear. The revelation of the Void Collective's true nature and the approaching silence had shaken the galaxy to its core. Some species had accepted the truth immediately, recognizing the urgency of galactic unity. Others remained skeptical, viewing it as an elaborate deception. A few had withdrawn entirely, choosing isolation over cooperation. But they were here, all of them, for the most important meeting in galactic history. Sarah had been appointed as Earth's representative, despite being only 24 years old and technically still a cadet. Her success at Kepler 442 and her role in establishing communication with the Void Collective had made her humanity's face in the new galactic order. At her side stood representatives of the Void Collective, 3 energy beings who had learned to manifest in forms that wouldn't overwhelm other species' senses. They appeared as shifting, translucent figures that somehow conveyed both immense power and desperate hope. "The situation is simple," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "In approximately 47 years, the silence will reach our galaxy. When it does, every star system, every planet, every living being will cease to exist unless we can mount a coordinated defense." A rumble of voices filled the chamber. Representative Korthak of the Draconian Empire stood, his reptilian features twisted with suspicion. "Why should we trust them? They have killed thousands of our people," one of the Void Collective beings responded, its voice echoing strangely as if spoken from a great distance. "We regret the loss of life, but we did not understand the permanence of individual consciousness in your species. We were testing your capabilities, preparing you for what is to come." "By attacking us," shouted Ambassador Thilla of the Zephyrian Confederacy. "By teaching you to work together," Sarah interjected, standing to address the assembly. "Look at what we've accomplished in just 6 months. Species that have been enemies for centuries are now sharing technology. The Academy's training programs have expanded to include cooperative tactics between races that never communicated before. The Void Collective's attacks forced us to develop exactly the kind of unity we'll need to survive." She gestured to the holographic display that dominated the center of the chamber, showing the latest projections of the silence's approach. "This isn't a debate about trust or past grievances. This is about survival, not just for any one species, but for the concept of existence itself." Elder Vash of the Altarian Council rose, her crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lights. "The humans speak of unity, but what proof do we have that such coordination is even possible? We are hundreds of different species with incompatible technologies, conflicting cultures, and fundamental disagreements about everything from physics to philosophy. The proof is sitting right here," Sarah replied, spreading her arms to indicate the entire assembly. 6 months ago, most of your species had never worked together on anything. Now you're all here in the same room discussing the survival of the galaxy. That's already more unity than has existed in galactic history. Admiral Kethvar, now serving as the Academy's liaison to the Council, activated a new section of the holographic display. "The preliminary tests have been promising. Combined human-Corvan engineering teams have developed shield technologies that neither species could create alone. Zephyrian speed combined with Altarian telepathic coordination has produced fighter tactics of unprecedented effectiveness. And the Void Collective's energy manipulation techniques, combined with our various species' material sciences, have created weapons that might actually be able to disrupt the silence," added Dr. Vasquez, now serving as Earth's chief science advisor. But Representative Zirion of the Nexari hegemony wasn't convinced. "Theoretical cooperation is one thing. Actual coordination in the face of annihilation is another. How do we know these alliances will hold when the real test comes?" Sarah had been expecting this question. She walked to the center of the chamber, standing directly beneath the holographic display of the approaching silence. "Because you're going to train for it," she announced. "All of you together!" The chamber erupted in confused voices. Sarah raised her hand for silence. "The Academy is being expanded," she continued. "Every species will send representatives, not just military personnel, but scientists, engineers, philosophers, artists, everyone who might have something to contribute to our collective survival." "Impossible," scoffed Delegate Wrath of the Silicon Hierarchy. The logistics alone would be overwhelming. The Void Collective has offered to provide the necessary infrastructure, one of the energy beings spoke. We have technologies that can create training environments large enough for all species to work together simultaneously. Sarah activated a new display showing architectural plans that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. A new academy. Not just a school, but a city. A place where every species in the galaxy can learn to work together as if their survival depends on it. Because it does, she added quietly. Elder, Vash studied the plans with her enhanced Altarian perception. This would require unprecedented resource allocation. Every species would need to contribute significantly. Then it's a good thing the silence has given us a deadline, Sarah replied. Nothing motivates cooperation like mutual extinction. The debate continued for hours, but gradually, Sarah could see the mood in the chamber shifting. One by one, species representatives began to see the necessity of what she was proposing. The scope was terrifying, the challenge is enormous, but the alternative was literally unthinkable. Finally, Chancellor Mordak of the Galactic Council called for order. A formal vote will be held, all in favor of the Unified Academy proposal. Hands, claws, tentacles, and various other appendages rose throughout the chamber. Sarah held her breath as the count was taken. The motion passes with 87% approval, Chancellor Mordak announced. Construction of the Unified Academy will begin immediately. As delegates began filing out of the chamber, many stopping to speak with Sarah or the Void Collective representatives, Admiral Kethvar approached her. Congratulations. Director Chen, he said formally. Director? Sarah asked, confused. The Council has voted to place you in charge of the Academy's Human Integration Program. You'll be responsible for teaching other species to think like humans when conventional thinking fails. Sarah looked around the emptying chamber, realizing the magnitude of what had just been decided. In less than 50 years, every species in the galaxy would need to work together with perfect coordination to face an enemy that could unmake reality itself. And somehow, humanity had become the teachers for that impossible task. Any regrets? Asked Dr. Vasquez, joining them. Sarah thought about her journey from Academy cadet to Galactic Director, about all the unconventional tactics and desperate strategies that had brought them to this point. She thought about the Void Collective's long struggle against the silence, about the billions of beings who were counting on them to succeed. Ask me again in 50 years, she replied. As she left the chamber, Sarah passed a memorial wall displaying the names of all those who had died in the Void Collective's attacks, the price paid for the galaxy to learn the lessons it needed to survive. Each name represented a sacrifice made for a greater understanding, a small loss in service of preventing an infinite one. At the bottom of the memorial, someone had inscribed a simple human phrase, "Sometimes you have to lose to win." Sarah touched the inscription gently, then walked toward her new office and the impossible task of teaching an entire galaxy to save itself. Behind her, the stars shone in their ancient patterns, beautiful and serene. But now she knew that beauty was temporary, that serenity was fragile, and that sometimes the greatest strength came from acknowledging your greatest weaknesses. The galaxy was about to learn what humans had always known, that survival wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. It was about never giving up, even when giving up was the logical choice, even when the instructor fired a shot past your ear to test your resolve, even when the only response that made sense was to empty the gun and calmly ask, "Any questions?" The debriefing room on Admiral Zonkar's flagship was cramped, hastily converted from a storage compartment to accommodate the rescued human prisoners. Sarah sat across from them, studying faces that showed the toll of captivity but also something else, a kind of knowledge that came from seeing behind the enemy's mask. Dr. Marcus Reynolds, former commander of the research station Prometheus 7, spoke first. His voice was hoarse but steady. "They're not what we thought they were, Captain Chen. Not at all." "Tell me everything," Sarah said, activating the recording system. "The Void Collective isn't a collective in the way we understand it. They're not a hive mind or a unified civilization." Reynolds paused, gathering his thoughts. "They're refugees." The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Around the table, the other rescued prisoners nodded grimly. "Refugees from what?" Sarah asked. "From something they call the silence. Something that destroyed their home galaxy entirely, Not just their civilization, but the galaxy itself. Turned it into a void of empty space where nothing can exist. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. How is that possible? We don't know. They don't fully understand it themselves. But whatever the silence is, it's still out there. Still expanding, still consuming galaxies. The Void Collective isn't trying to conquer our galaxy. They're trying to prepare it to survive what's coming. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, former pilot of the destroyer Valkyrie, leaned forward. Their attacks aren't random, Captain. They're testing us. Every battle, every engagement is designed to evaluate our defensive capabilities, our unity, our ability to work together when faced with extinction. But the destruction, the deaths, Sarah protested. They don't understand individual mortality the way we do, Reynolds explained. Their species, the original Void Collective, were energy beings who could transfer their consciousness between different forms. When they say eliminate the defenders, they think they're just disrupting temporary physical forms, not ending actual lives. The implications were staggering. Sarah's mind raced through everything she knew about the Void Collective's tactics, reinterpreting them through this new lens. The psychological warfare, she said slowly, using human voices to demoralize our forces. They were trying to teach us, said Commander James Park, former security chief of Mining Station Omega. They thought if they could make us understand loss and fear, we'd develop stronger defensive capabilities. They don't realize that humans already understand loss and fear better than most species in the galaxy. Show them, Reynolds said to Kim. The pilot hesitated, then rolled up her sleeve to reveal a small device implanted in her forearm. It looked organic, like living metal fused with her skin. They gave these to all of us, she explained. Communication devices that let us interface directly with their systems. We've seen their memories, their history, their perspective. Jesus, Sarah whispered. You've been connected to them. Not controlled, Kim corrected quickly. Connected. They don't take over minds, they share experiences. It's how they learned to copy our tactics so quickly, but it's also how we learned what they really are. Reynolds activated the device, and suddenly the air above the table shimmered with holographic images. Sarah found herself looking at scenes of unimaginable destruction, an entire galaxy being consumed by something that wasn't darkness but the absence of existence itself. The silence started. In their home galaxy about 1,000 years ago, Reynolds narrated. It began in the core systems and spread outward, not destroying matter, but unmaking it. Stars, planets, space itself. Everything it touched simply ceased to exist. The images showed the Void Collective's desperate evacuation. Billions of energy beings fleeing through dimensional rifts to escape the expanding nothingness. They had arrived in this galaxy only to discover that the silence was following them, moving slower between galaxies but still coming. They have maybe 50 years before it reaches the outer rim of our galaxy, Kim said quietly. And when it does, unless every species in the galaxy is prepared to work together with perfect coordination, we'll all die. Not killed, unmade, like we never existed at all. Sarah stared at the holographic display, watching the silence consume star systems like a cancer eating through tissue. Why didn't they just tell us? They tried at first, Commander Park explained. But their communication methods are based on direct consciousness transfer. When they attempted contact with other species, the experience drove most beings insane. Only humans seemed able to maintain their sanity during direct contact, and even then it was difficult. They've been trying to prepare the galaxy for 50 years, Reynolds continued. Every attack, every battle, has been designed to force species to evolve beyond their individual strengths and learn to work together. But it's not working fast enough. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. The Academy, all the training exercises, the way they adapted to our different species' capabilities. The Academy is part of their plan, Kim confirmed. They've been observing it for years, hoping it would produce leaders capable of uniting the galaxy when the time comes. And our simulation victory? Sarah asked. That's when they decided to accelerate the timeline, Reynolds said grimly. Your tactics proved that humans might be the key to galactic unity. Your species' ability to think beyond conventional patterns, to find strength in apparent weakness, to unite different capabilities into something greater than the sum of its parts. The holographic display shifted to show tactical projections of the coming battle against the silence. It was clear that no single species, no matter how advanced, could stand against it alone. Only perfect coordination between all galactic civilizations had any chance of success. "They're planning to reveal themselves," Park said, "to make contact with every major galactic government simultaneously and explain the situation. But they need someone they trust to help them make that contact without causing panic or madness." Sarah looked around the table at the faces of her fellow humans, seeing the weight of impossible responsibility reflected in their eyes. "They want us to be ambassadors," she said, "to help them communicate with species that can't handle direct consciousness transfer." "More than that," Reynolds said. "They want humans to help train the galaxy in the kind of unconventional thinking that will be necessary to survive. Your species' talent for finding patterns in chaos, for creating unity out of diversity, for turning weakness into strength." Sarah stood and walked to the small porthole, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the silence was approaching, a wave of non-existence that would unmake everything she had ever known or cared about. "How long do we have to prepare?" she asked. 50 years, maybe less," Kim replied. "And it will require every ship, every species, every individual in the galaxy working in perfect coordination." Sarah turned back to the group, her expression resolute. "Then we'd better get started." As she spoke, she realized that everything she had learned at the academy, every unconventional tactic, every moment of turning apparent defeat into victory, had been preparing her for this moment. Humanity was about to become the teacher for an entire galaxy's survival, and the first lesson would be the hardest one of all. Sometimes the enemy you're fighting isn't really your enemy. Sometimes they're trying to save you, and you're too busy fighting to listen. The real enemy was still coming, and when it arrived, there would be no room for the luxury of individual species thinking only of themselves. It was time for the galaxy to learn what humans had always known. Sometimes you have to sacrifice everything to save what matters most. The command center erupted in shocked voices speaking a dozen different languages, but the meaning was universal. Disbelief and outrage at Sarah's suggestion. "Absolutely not," Admiral Zonkar stated firmly. "We do not surrender to the Void Collective ever." "Let me explain," Sarah said, raising her voice over the commotion. "I'm not talking about actual surrender. I'm talking about strategic deception on a scale the galaxy has never seen." She moved to the tactical display, her fingers dancing over the controls to highlight specific formations. "Look at their positioning. They're using our own psychological tactics against us, but they're doing it with perfect alien efficiency. No mistakes, no hesitation, no doubt. How is that a weakness?" Colonel Zarian asked. "Because doubt is human. Hesitation is human. Imperfection is human." Sarah's eyes blazed with sudden understanding. "They've learned to copy our tactics, but they can't copy our psychology. They can simulate human strategic thinking, but they can't simulate human emotional thinking." Webb leaned forward. "You're talking about exploiting their perfection?" "Exactly." Sarah turned back to the assembled officers. "Every species in the galaxy approaches warfare logically. Even human tactics, when taught to other species, become logical, systematic approaches. But humans didn't develop these tactics through logic. We developed them through centuries of emotional, irrational, desperate fighting." She gestured to the ongoing battle display. "The Void Collective has learned to counter logical applications of human tactics. But what if we stopped being logical?" Admiral Zonkar's expression remained skeptical. "Explain this false surrender concept. We broadcast a surrender, begin withdrawing our forces, show every sign of defeat. But instead of actually surrendering, we use their moment of victory to position ourselves for a counterattack they'll never see coming. That's..." Colonel Zarian paused, his telepathic abilities analyzing the concept. "That's either brilliant or suicidal." "With humans, those are often the same thing," Sarah replied grimly. Dr. Vasquez spoke up from her position at a medical monitoring station. "The psychological profile fits. Humans have a documented history of using apparent defeat as a weapon. The Void Collective's databases probably contain hundreds of examples, but they'll all be filed under irrational human behavior rather than tactical doctrine. Because to every other species it is irrational," Sarah said. "But to humans, desperation and hope existing simultaneously is just Tuesday." Admiral Zonkar studied the tactical display, his calm Nexari mind working through the implications. "The civilian evacuation would continue during this false surrender. Accelerated. We make them believe we're abandoning the system, which gives us cover to move civilians out faster while positioning our real assets for the counterattack. And if it fails? Sarah met his gaze steadily. Then we lose anyway, but we lose fighting in a way that might teach them something wrong about human psychology. Even our failure becomes intelligence that could help the next battle. The Admiral's 6 arms moved in complex patterns that Sarah had learned indicated deep consideration. Around the command center, officers from various species whispered in their native tongues, but she could see the idea taking hold. There's another factor, Jackson added from his communication station. Those human voices they're using for psychological warfare? If we can get close enough during the false surrender, I might be able to trace the source. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. If the Void Collective was indeed holding human prisoners, a rescue attempt might be possible during the confusion of the false surrender. It's insane, Admiral Zonkar said finally. Yes, sir, Sarah agreed. It violates every principle of honorable warfare. Yes, sir. It depends entirely on our ability to convincingly fake emotions we're actually feeling. That's the most human thing of all. Sir? A long silence filled the command center as the Admiral considered. Finally, his arms moved in the gesture Sarah had learned meant acceptance. Very well. But if this fails, history will remember it as the most spectacular military disaster in galactic history. And if it succeeds, Sarah replied, history will remember it as the day humanity taught the galaxy that sometimes you have to lose to win. The false surrender began 20 minutes later. Admiral Zonkar's flagship broadcast a carefully crafted message of defeat, citing overwhelming odds and the need to preserve civilian lives. The remaining defense fleet began withdrawing in apparent disarray, their formations breaking down into what looked like panicked retreat. But underneath the apparent chaos was careful choreography. Ships that seemed to be fleeing in panic were actually moving into predetermined positions. The disorganized retreat was placing assets exactly where they needed to be for the counterattack. The hardest part was making it look real. Sarah found herself having to coach alien officers in the art of appearing defeated, while actually preparing for attack. You're too composed, she told a Corvan ship captain over the communication link. Your species doesn't show fear the way humans do, but you can show frustration, anger at being forced to retreat. But I am not actually frustrated, the captain replied logically. Then think about something that would frustrate you. Think about losing when you should have won. To her surprise, the Corvan's posture shifted subtly, and his next transmission carried exactly the right note of suppressed rage at an unfair defeat. The Void Collective response was immediate and predictable. Their formations tightened as they moved to secure their victory, their ships positioning themselves to prevent any escape from the system. They were behaving exactly as their tactical programming dictated when facing a defeated enemy. Phase 2, Sarah announced. Now came the most dangerous part. Several ships had to actually allow themselves to be captured to sell the deception. Volunteer crews from multiple species submitted to Void Collective boarding parties, their ships' vital systems rigged to provide false intelligence while hiding the real strategic situation. Jackson, any luck on those transmissions? Sarah asked, getting closer. The human voices are definitely coming from one of their command ships, but they're using some kind of relay system. Give me 10 more minutes. Those 10 minutes felt like hours as the false surrender continued. More ships submitted to capture. More personnel allowed themselves to be taken prisoner, all to maintain the illusion of defeat. Then Jackson's face lit up with triumph. Got them. 3rd Command Ship, Section 7. I'm reading at least 12 human biosignatures. Admiral, Sarah called. We have a rescue target. Zonkar's expression was grim. That ship is in the center of their formation. Getting to it would require exactly the kind of suicidal charge that a desperate, defeated human commander might attempt as a final gesture, Sarah finished. Understanding dawned in the Admiral's eyes. You planned this. I hoped for it. There's a difference. Phase 3? He asked. Sarah looked at the tactical display, where the Void Collective fleet was now spread out in a victory formation, their ships positioned to secure their conquest rather than fight a battle. Phase 3, she confirmed. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. The defeated human fleet suddenly erupted from their apparent retreat with a coordinated fury that caught the Void Collective completely off guard. Ships that had seemed damaged revealed themselves to be fully functional. Fleeing vessels suddenly reversed course with weapons blazing. The entire carefully orchestrated surrender dissolved into a perfectly timed assault that hit the Void Collective from directions they had never anticipated. But the real masterstroke was the rescue mission. As chaos erupted throughout the Void Collective formation, Admiral Zonkar's flagship made what appeared to be a desperate, emotion-driven charge at the command ship holding the human prisoners. To alien observers, it looked like exactly the kind of irrational, emotional decision that humans were known for, throwing away tactical advantage for the slim chance of saving their own species. The Void Collective's tactical computers, analyzing the charge, classified it as predictable human irrationality and allocated minimal resources to counter it. They were wrong. The rescue was successful. The 12 human prisoners recovered. But more importantly, their debriefing revealed intelligence that would change everything. The galaxy thought it knew about the Void Collective. As the enemy fleet retreated in confusion from their first major defeat, Sarah stood in the command center surrounded by officers from a dozen species, all looking at her with expressions of awe and concern. She had just proven that humans could win through losing, succeed through failing, and find strength in apparent weakness. It was the most human victory in galactic history. The summons came at 300 hours, waking Sarah from a deep sleep. Emergency lights bathed the Academy corridors in red as she and her team made their way to the command center. This wasn't a drill. The tension in the air was too real. The expressions on the alien faces they passed too grim. Admiral Kethvar stood before a massive holographic display showing real-time galactic communication networks. Dozens of red indicators flashed across the map, each one representing a star system under attack. The Void Collective has launched a coordinated offensive across 17 sectors, he announced without preamble. They're moving faster than we've ever seen before, hitting multiple targets simultaneously. Our standard response protocols are proving ineffective. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Around her, cadets from various species whispered in their native languages. But the tone was universal: fear. Furthermore, the Admiral continued, they appear to be using new tactics. Tactics that counter the defensive strategies we developed based on your simulation success, Cadet Chen. All eyes turned to Sarah, and she felt the weight of implication. Had her team's victory in the simulation somehow taught the Void Collective how to counter human tactical thinking? Sir, she said, stepping forward, are you suggesting they learned from our exercise? We don't know. But their current assault pattern specifically targets the kind of deception-based defenses your team employed. They're no longer falling for misdirection tactics, and they seem to be anticipating multi-layered strategic deception. The holographic display zoomed in on one particular system, Kepler 442, a major trade hub with a population of over 3 billion beings from dozens of species. The defense fleet at Kepler 442 is using modified human tactics based on your simulation data, Admiral Kethvar explained. They've held out for 6 hours, longer than any other system under attack, but they're requesting immediate reinforcement. What kind of reinforcement? Asked Commander Thrakvor, who had just entered the command center. Strategic consultation. Someone who understands human tactical doctrine well enough to adapt it in real time, as the Void Collective adapts to counter it. Sarah realized what was being suggested and felt a chill run down her spine. Sir, with respect, I'm still a cadet. I've never commanded in actual combat. Neither has anyone else when it comes to fighting the Void Collective using human doctrine, the Admiral replied. But you have something our experienced commanders lack: an intuitive understanding of how your species approaches warfare. The main display shifted to show the current battle at Kepler 442. Could see the defending forces arranged in patterns that looked familiar, her patterns, adapted and modified for a larger scale. But something was wrong with the execution. They're too rigid, she murmured, studying the tactical display. Explain. Sarah pointed to the defensive formations. They're using human tactics, but they're applying them like galactic standard doctrine. Look at their deception patterns. They're too regular, too predictable. Human tactical deception works because it's based on psychological understanding of the enemy. You can't just copy the tactics. You have to understand the thinking behind them. Admiral Kethvar's 6 arms moved in complex patterns. The transport ship leaves in 20 minutes. You'll be accompanied by a full tactical advisory team, but the on-scene commander has requested you specifically. Sir, this is not a request, Cadet Chen. This is a direct order from Galactic Strategic Command. The survival of Kepler 442 may depend on insights only your species can provide. 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself aboard a fast courier ship racing through hyperspace toward a real battle. With her were 3 of her fellow humans, Webb, Vasquez, and Jackson, along with a team of senior officers from various species. The mood was tense, everyone aware that they were heading into a combat situation unlike anything the galaxy had faced. During the 8-hour journey, Sarah studied every piece of data available about the Void Collective's new tactics. What she saw troubled her deeply. The enemy wasn't just adapting to human strategies, they were learning to think like humans. They're using our own psychological warfare techniques against us, she explained to the senior officers. Look at these attack patterns. They're not just adapting to our tactics. They're trying to get inside our heads to make us second-guess our own strategies. Colonel Zarion, a veteran Altarian commander, studied the data with his telepathically enhanced analytical abilities. But how is this possible? The Void Collective has never shown this level of psychological sophistication before. Sarah had been wondering the same thing, and a disturbing possibility was forming in her mind. What if they didn't develop this capability on their own? What if they're using captured human personnel to understand our thinking? The implications of that possibility cast a dark shadow over the remainder of the journey. They dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system to find a battle in progress. The Void Collective fleet was massive, easily 3 times larger than the defending forces. But the defenders were still holding, using modified human tactics to create uncertainty and confusion among the attacking forces. Incoming. Transmission from Defense Command, reported the ship's communication officer. The main screen lit up with the image of Admiral Zon Kar, a Nexari commander Sarah recognized from Academy studies. His usually calm demeanor showed clear signs of stress. Thank the Void you're here, he said without preamble. We've been holding for 8 hours, but they're adapting faster than we can modify our tactics. Every trick we try, they counter within minutes. What's your current status? Sarah asked, trying to project more confidence than she felt. We've got maybe 2 hours of ammunition left at current expenditure rates. The civilian evacuation is only 30% complete. And worst of all, they've started using psychological tactics against us. What kind of psychological tactics? Admiral Zonkar's expression darkened. They're transmitting human voices. People calling for help, claiming to be prisoners. It's affecting the morale of our human personnel, and it's disrupting our command structure. Sarah felt ice in her veins. Her suspicion was confirmed. The Void Collective had captured humans and was, using them not just for intelligence but as psychological weapons. We need to get down to the command ship immediately, she said. The transfer to Admiral Zonkar's flagship took place under combat conditions, with Void Collective fighters harassing the shuttle throughout the approach. Sarah got her first real taste of actual combat as energy beams flashed past the viewports and the ship shuddered under defensive fire. The flagship's command center was controlled chaos. Officers from multiple species worked frantically at their stations, while tactical displays showed the constantly shifting battle situation. The stress was palpable, and Sarah could see the toll that 8 hours of continuous combat was taking on the crew. Status report, she requested as soon as she arrived. We're holding 3 defensive perimeters, Admiral Zonkar explained, indicating the tactical display. But they're probing constantly, looking for weaknesses. Every time we reinforce one area, they shift their attack to another. Sarah studied the display, her mind racing. The Void Collective's current tactics were indeed based on human psychological warfare principles, but they were being applied with alien efficiency. It was like facing a distorted mirror of human strategic thinking. They're not just copying our tactics, she realized. They're improving on them, taking human psychological insights and applying them with perfect coordination and unlimited resources. Can you counter it? Asked Colonel Zarion. Sarah stared at the tactical display, watching the ebb and flow of battle. An idea was forming, dangerous, untested, but possibly their only chance. Maybe, she said slowly. But we'd have to do something that goes against every principle of conventional warfare. What do you mean? Sarah turned to face the assembled officers. knowing that what she was about to propose would sound like madness. We have to surrender. The Academy's Central Command Center buzzed with activity as reports from various training exercises filtered in. Sarah had been at the Academy for 2 months now, and the human contingent had consistently surprised their instructors with unconventional solutions to seemingly impossible challenges. Today's exercise was different. Today, they would face live combat simulation against the Academy's most advanced training protocols. Scenarios based on actual galactic conflicts where standard tactics had failed. Admiral Kethvar, the Academy's commanding officer, stood before the assembled cadets. His species, the Nexari, were known for their strategic minds and calm demeanor under pressure. His 6 arms moved in subtle gestures as he spoke, each motion precisely calculated for maximum communication efficiency. The scenario you will face today recreates the Battle of Helix Station, he announced. 3 years ago, the station fell to a coordinated attack by the Void Collective. Despite superior firepower and defensive positions, the defending forces were overwhelmed through tactics we still do not fully understand. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Void Collective was the galactic community's greatest threat, a mysterious force that seemed to appear from nowhere, strike with devastating efficiency, and vanish before effective countermeasures could be implemented. Their technology was unlike anything the galaxy had seen, and their tactics defied conventional military wisdom. Each species team will attempt to defend a recreation of Helix Station against simulated Void Collective forces, Kethvar continued. The simulation uses all available data from the actual battle. Consider this both a training exercise and a research opportunity. If any team can identify weaknesses in Void Collective tactics, that information could save countless lives. The weight of responsibility settled over the assembled cadets. This wasn't just about graduation anymore. It was about the future of galactic civilization. The Corvin team went first, approaching the simulation with their species' traditional straightforward tactics. They established strong defensive positions, used their superior firepower to create kill zones, and fought with the disciplined ferocity their species was known for. They lasted 18 minutes before being overwhelmed, matching the performance of the actual Helix Station defenders. The Zephyrian team attempted a mobile defense, using their speed to create confusion and strike at vulnerable points. Their approach was elegant and swift, but the Void Collective's adaptive tactics eventually cornered them. They lasted 22 minutes. The Altarian team used their telepathic coordination to create a perfect defensive network, each defender knowing instantly what the others were thinking and planning. It was the most coordinated defense yet seen, but even perfect coordination couldn't overcome the Void Collective's seemingly random and unpredictable assault patterns. 24 minutes. Then it was humanity's turn. Sarah stood in the command center of the simulated Helix Station, looking out at the tactical displays showing the approaching Void Collective fleet. Her team was positioned throughout the station, each in positions that would have been considered suboptimal by conventional standards. Remember, she said into the comm system, everything we know about the Void Collective suggests they adapt to their opponent's strengths. Every other team has played to their species' advantages. We're going to do something different. What's the plan, Captain? Asked Lieutenant Webb from his position in the station's engineering section. We're going to be unpredictable, Sarah replied. Not randomly unpredictable, strategically unpredictable. We're going to use the one advantage humans have that no other species possesses. Which is? Asked Dr. Vasquez from the medical bay she'd converted into a sensor monitoring station. We're the only species that learned warfare from fighting ourselves. The Void Collective ships began their approach. Sleek black vessels that seemed to absorb light itself. Sarah watched their formation, noting the patterns that had confused and overwhelmed the other defending teams. They're trying to establish fire superiority zones, she observed. Classic tactic. Control the battle space by denying it to the enemy. But they're using an adaptive algorithm that responds to defensive positioning. Recommendations? Asked Cadet Park from the tactical center. Sarah smiled grimly. We give them what they expect. Then we change the rules. The human defense began conventionally enough. They established standard defensive positions, created overlapping fields of fire, and began engaging the approaching Void collective forces. To any observer, it looked like a textbook defense that would inevitably fail just like the others. But Sarah was watching something else, the way the Void collective ships responded to each defensive action. Their adaptive protocols were incredibly sophisticated, but they were still protocols. They followed patterns even if those patterns were complex beyond easy recognition. Phase 2, Sarah announced after 5 minutes of conventional fighting. Suddenly, the human defense seemed to collapse. Defensive positions were abandoned, fire patterns became erratic, and the coordinated defense dissolved into what appeared to be chaos. The Void collective forces, as their programming dictated, moved to exploit this apparent breakdown. They advanced more aggressively, concentrating their forces to overwhelm what seemed like a broken defense. They had just made exactly the mistake Sarah had been hoping for. Phase 3, she commanded. What had appeared to be chaos revealed itself as carefully orchestrated deception. The abandoned positions had been rigged with surprises. The erratic fire patterns had been herding the Void collective ships into predetermined kill zones. The broken coordination had been a mask for an entirely different kind of coordination, one based on human tactical doctrine that emphasized deception, misdirection, and turning apparent weakness into strength. The Void collective found themselves caught in a trap they couldn't have anticipated, because it required a level of tactical deception that no other galactic species employed. Their adaptive protocols scrambled to respond, but they were designed to counter strength, not to unravel deliberate misdirection. Engineering now, Sarah called. Webb's modifications to the station's power systems came online. Instead of using the defensive shields conventionally, he'd rerouted them to create false sensor signatures. The Void collective's targeting systems suddenly found themselves facing dozens of apparent targets, where only one existed, and missing the real threats entirely. Medical, execute, Sarah ordered next. Dr. Vasquez had spent the first phase of the battle using her medical sensors to study the Void collective ship's energy signatures. Her modified medical scanners had identified frequency patterns in their shields, patterns that conventional military sensors couldn't detect, but that medical equipment, designed to work with biological systems, could recognize. The human weapons, recalibrated based on Vasquez's data, began finding gaps in Void collective defenses that shouldn't have existed. Tactical. Finish it, Sarah commanded. Cadet Park's analysis of the battle patterns had revealed something crucial. The Void collective's adaptive protocols weren't just responding to current threats. They were learning from previous encounters stored in their database. But humans were the first species to deliberately feed false information into that learning process. The final phase of the human defense was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. It combined conventional military tactics with psychological warfare, electronic deception, and adaptive strategies that turned the Void collective's greatest strength, their ability to learn and adapt, against them. When the simulation ended, 47 minutes had passed. The human team had not only survived but had managed to drive off the simulated Void collective forces. The command center fell, silent as the implications sank in. Admiral Kethvar's 6 arms, moved in complex patterns that Sarah had learned, indicated deep thought. Explain your methodology, he requested. Sarah took a breath. Every other species approaches warfare as an extension of their natural advantages. Corvan strength, Zephyrian speed, Altarian coordination. But humans learned warfare by fighting humans. We developed tactics specifically designed to defeat opponents who think like us, who know our capabilities, who can predict our standard responses. She gestured to the tactical display, still showing the final positions of the simulated battle. The Void collective's adaptive protocols are incredibly sophisticated, but they're designed to counter conventional tactics. They've never faced an opponent that deliberately uses deception and misdirection as primary weapons. You deliberately appeared weak to draw them into a trap, Admiral Kethvar observed. We used apparent weakness to mask actual strength, Sarah corrected. It's a fundamental human tactical principle. When your enemy is stronger than you don't meet them strength against strength. You change the nature of the contest until strength becomes irrelevant. The Admiral's arms moved in what Sarah had learned was a gesture of appreciation. This information will be forwarded immediately to Strategic Command. Your species has provided insights that may change the course of the war. As the cadets filed out of the command center, Sarah noticed the way other species looked at the humans now. The dismissive glances had been replaced by something else, respect mixed with a healthy dose of wariness. They were beginning to understand that humanity might. 3 weeks into academy training, the humans had begun to establish themselves as something the galactic community hadn't seen before. While individually they might not match the raw power of a Corvan or the speed of a Zephyrian, as a group they displayed a level of coordination and adaptability that caught their instructors off guard. Sarah found herself naturally emerging as the unofficial leader of the human contingent. It wasn't something she'd sought, but when problems arose, the others looked to her for solutions. Today's challenge would test that leadership more than any before. Instructor Vex Prime stood before the assembled cadets in Training Hall 7, her crystalline Altarian features reflecting the harsh overhead lights. Unlike the telepathic bond most of her species shared, Vex Prime had undergone mental conditioning to block telepathic abilities, making her one of the few Altarians capable of training non-telepathic species. "Today you face the Labyrinth trial," she announced, her voice carrying an odd harmonic quality that made it seem to come from multiple directions. "Each species group will navigate a maze designed to test your tactical thinking, physical capabilities, and ability to work under pressure." Behind her, a massive holographic display showed a three-dimensional maze that shifted and changed even as they watched. Walls moved, passages opened and closed, and various obstacles appeared and disappeared throughout the structure. "The maze adapts to each group's strengths and weaknesses," Vex Prime continued. "It will present challenges specifically designed to exploit your species' known limitations. For the Corvan team, passages will be narrow and require precision rather than brute force. For the Zephyrians, obstacles will demand patience rather than speed." Sarah studied the display, her mind already working through potential strategies. She could see her fellow humans doing the same, each bringing their own expertise to bear on the problem. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, their demolitions expert, was studying the structural elements. Dr. Elena Vasquez, their medic and xenobiologist, was analyzing the biological hazards shown in the simulation. "And for humans?" asked Cadet Jackson, their communications specialist. Vex Prime's crystalline features shifted in what might have been a smile. "The maze will test your greatest weakness, your fragility. Many obstacles that other species could simply power through or speed past will require you to find alternative solutions." The first team to enter was the Corvan squad, led by a massive warrior named Graktor. Sarah watched the displays as the 8-foot-tall aliens immediately encountered passages too narrow for their bulk, but they adapted quickly, using their smaller tools to manipulate the maze's mechanisms and create new paths. Next came the Zephyrians, their naturally swift movements serving them well until they encountered sections that required careful, methodical progress through fields of energy that would punish hasty movement. Then it was humanity's turn. The 20 humans gathered at the maze entrance, which sealed behind them with a soft hiss. Immediately, Sarah could see the maze beginning to adapt. Passages that had been wide enough for the larger species began to narrow, not to challenge human size but to create choke points where their lack of natural armor would be a disadvantage. "Spread out," Sarah commanded quietly. Webb analyzed structural weak points. Vasquez scanned for biological hazards. "Jackson, see if you can tap into the maze's communication systems. Everyone else, standard recon formation." They moved into the maze with careful precision. The first challenge came quickly, a corridor filled with energy fields that pulsed in complex patterns. Where the Corvan team had simply absorbed the energy with their natural armor, and the Zephyrians had used their speed to dash through during brief gaps, humans had neither option. "Pattern analysis?" Sarah asked. 37-second cycles, reported Cadet Park, their mathematician. "But the gaps are too small for conventional passage." "Not conventional," Sarah murmured, studying the field. "Webb, can you disrupt the field generators?" "Negative. They're hardened against tampering." Sarah watched the energy pattern for another full cycle, then suddenly smiled. "Jackson, boost the comms. We're going to talk our way through." "Ma'am, the maze adapts to our responses. It's learning from our behavior." "But what if we give it conflicting information?" She positioned her team in a specific formation, then began calling out movements that contradicted their actual actions. "Moving left," she announced while directing her team right. "Single file." she said while maintaining their spread formation. The energy fields flickered, their pattern disrupting slightly as the maze's adaptive systems struggled to process the contradictory input. "Now," Sarah commanded. The team moved through the disrupted field pattern using the momentary confusion to pass safely. It was a uniquely human solution, using deception and misdirection rather than brute force or speed. The next challenge was a chamber filled with floating platforms over a pit that would eliminate any cadet who fell. The platforms moved in response to weight and momentum, requiring precise timing and balance. Other species had used their natural abilities here too. Corvin teams simply jumped the distances with their powerful legs. Zephyrians danced across the platforms too quickly for them to respond, but humans were too heavy for the quick approach and not strong enough for the direct one. "Vasquez," Sarah called, "what do you make of the platform mechanisms?" The doctor studied the moving surfaces with her scanner. They're responsive to distributed weight and movement vibration. They're trying to predict our next move based on our current position and momentum, so we don't give them a consistent pattern to predict. Sarah looked at her team. "Remember training exercise 7 from Earth Academy? The trust fall progression?" Understanding dawned on several faces. It was an exercise unique to human military training. Based on the species' unusual ability to coordinate through trust and communication, rather than shared instincts or telepathy. "Form up," Sarah ordered. What followed was a display of human coordination that left the watching instructors stunned. Instead of individual crossings, the humans created a living chain. As one person moved to a platform, others would position themselves to catch, redirect, or boost them as needed. They treated the platforms not as individual challenges, but as part of a single system that they could manipulate through coordinated action. They moved across the chamber like a complex machine, each person serving multiple roles, sometimes a support, sometimes a redirect, sometimes a counterweight. When Cadet Morrison lost his footing, 3 teammates immediately adjusted their positions to catch and redirect him without breaking the overall flow. It was slower than the Zephyrian approach and less direct than the Corvin method, but it was uniquely human, turning individual weakness into collective strength. The maze seemed to struggle with this approach. Its adaptive systems had been designed to exploit species' weaknesses, but humans were turning their weaknesses into a different kind of strength. The final challenge was a puzzle chamber where success required manipulating a complex array of energy conduits while under time pressure. Previous teams had used their species' natural advantages, Corvin strength to force stuck mechanisms, Zephyrian speed to complete the task before time ran out, Altarian telepathy to coordinate multiple simultaneous actions. Sarah studied the chamber layout, then made a decision that would define how the galactic community viewed humanity. "We're not going to solve the puzzle," she announced. Her team looked at her in confusion, but Sarah's plan was already forming. She'd noticed something the maze designers might not have considered. The puzzle is designed to test our ability to work within the system's parameters, but humans have a history of changing the parameters when the system doesn't work for us. Instead of attempting to solve the energy conduit puzzle, Sarah directed her team to focus on the chamber itself, using techniques that would have been impossible for most species. Their smaller size allowing access to maintenance areas, their manipulative appendages capable of delicate work in tight spaces, their problem-solving approach that favored adaptation over adherence to rules. They began to modify the chamber itself. "Vasquez, can you reroute the timing mechanism through the emergency systems?" Sarah asked. "I think so, but that's not how the puzzle is supposed to work. The puzzle is supposed to test our capabilities. Let's show them what we're really capable of." Within minutes, the humans had transformed the challenge from a timed puzzle into a demonstration of adaptive engineering. They didn't solve the puzzle, they rebuilt it to solve itself. The maze exit opened, and 20 humans emerged to find their instructors waiting with expressions that ranged from amazement to concern. "Explain your actions in the final chamber," Vex Prime demanded. Sarah stood at attention, her team arranged behind her. "The challenge was designed to test our species' capabilities, ma'am. We demonstrated our greatest capability, the ability to adapt any system to our needs rather than adapting ourselves to the system's limitations." For a long moment, silence filled the hall. Then Vex Prime's crystalline features shifted into what was unmistakably a smile. "Most interesting," she said softly. Most interesting indeed. The Galactic Defense Academy had seen many species pass through its halls over the centuries. Tall, graceful Altarians with their crystal blue skin and telepathic abilities. The hulking Corvan warriors, each standing nearly 3 meters tall with natural armor plating. Swift Zephyrian scouts who could move faster than most eyes could track, but never had they seen anything quite like the humans. Captain Sarah Chen stood at attention in the pristine white corridor, her dark hair pulled back in regulation style, her uniform crisp despite the long journey from Earth. Behind her, 19 other humans waited in similar formation. They were the first of their species to be accepted into the Academy, and the weight of representing all of humanity pressed down on each of them like a heavy blanket. "You're smaller than I expected," came a gravelly voice from ahead. Commander Thrakvor emerged from the shadows, his massive Corvan frame casting long shadows across the polished floor. His forearms were crossed over his chest, and his black eyes studied the humans with obvious disappointment. Much smaller. Sarah kept her expression neutral, though she felt her jaw tighten slightly. At 5'6", she was actually one of the taller humans in their group. But compared to most galactic species, humans were indeed on the smaller side. It was something they'd have to prove didn't matter. "Size isn't everything, sir," Sarah replied evenly. Thrakvor's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "We shall see, human. The Academy has a 93% failure rate. Most species that make it through are either naturally gifted warriors or possess significant physical advantages. You have neither." The commander began walking, his heavy footsteps echoing through the corridor. The humans followed, trying to match his much longer stride. As they walked, other cadets stopped to stare. Sarah could see the curiosity in their alien faces, mixed with skepticism and sometimes outright dismissal. "Your species was only discovered 50 years ago," Thrakvor continued without looking back. "Most civilizations require centuries of galactic contact before they're even considered for Academy admission. The Council made an exception for humans due to your unique circumstances." Sarah knew he was referring to humanity's rapid technological advancement and their unusual approach to warfare. While most species had evolved past physical conflict through superior technology or natural abilities, humans had refined the art of war over millennia. It made them both fascinating and concerning to the galactic community. They entered a vast training hall where dozens of cadets were engaged in various exercises. Sarah watched a group of Altarians practicing telepathic combat, their movements perfectly synchronized as they anticipated each other's actions. Nearby, Corvan cadets sparred with weapons that would have required multiple humans just to lift. "Your first test begins immediately," Thrakvor announced, stopping in the center of the hall. "Combat assessment. You will face opponents selected based on galactic standard protocols." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Standard protocols meant they'd be facing opponents considered appropriate for their size and apparent capabilities. But those protocols had been designed for species that relied on natural advantages. Humans had learned to overcome disadvantages through tactics, technology, and sheer determination. "Who volunteers to go first?" Thrakvor asked, his voice carrying across the hall. Conversation stopped as other cadets turned to watch. Without hesitation, Sarah stepped forward. "I will, sir." The commander's mandibles clicked again. "Very well. Your opponent will be Cadet 69, a mechanoid from the Synthesis Collective." A figure approached from across the hall, and Sarah had to suppress a gulp. 69 stood nearly 7 feet tall, its body a perfect fusion of organic tissue and mechanical enhancement. Its left arm had been replaced entirely with a multi-tool appendage, and its eyes glowed with a soft blue light that indicated active targeting systems. "Combat will be conducted with standard Academy training weapons," Thrakvor explained, gesturing to a rack of devices that looked like sophisticated laser tag equipment. "Non-lethal, but they simulate real combat damage. First to score 3 hits wins." Sarah selected her weapon, testing its weight and balance. It was heavier than she was used to, designed for larger hands than hers. She'd have to adapt quickly. "Any questions before we begin?" Thrakvor asked. "No, sir." Both Sarah and 69 replied simultaneously. They moved to opposite ends of a marked circle while other cadets gathered around to watch. Sarah could hear whispered conversations in various alien languages, and she didn't need a translator to know they weren't optimistic about her chances. The mechanoid raised its weapon with mechanical precision, the targeting system in its eyes already calculating optimal firing solutions. Its movements were perfectly efficient, wasting no energy on unnecessary motion. "Begin," Thrakvor commanded. Zix-9 immediately fired, the training beam shooting exactly where Sarah had been standing. But she was already moving, diving to the side in a pattern that seemed random but was actually carefully calculated to avoid predictable movement. She'd studied mechanoid tactics during the journey to the academy, learning that their greatest strength, perfect logical analysis, could also be a weakness. The mechanoid adjusted its aim, firing again. Sarah rolled behind a training obstacle, coming up in a crouch. She could hear the whirring of Zix-9's mechanical components as it processed her movements, trying to find the pattern. But Sarah wasn't using patterns. She was using something the mechanoid's logical mind couldn't easily predict. Pure human intuition mixed with controlled chaos. She burst from cover at an angle that forced Zix-9 to recalculate, then immediately changed direction again. The mechanoid's shots came close but couldn't quite compensate for her erratic movement. Then Sarah did something completely unexpected. Instead of continuing to dodge, she suddenly charged straight at her opponent, weapon firing. The first shot caught Zix-9's center mass before its systems could adjust to this seemingly suicidal tactic. The mechanoid quickly adapted, its superior reflexes allowing it to score a hit on Sarah's shoulder as she closed the distance. But she didn't stop. She continued her charge, diving and rolling at the last second to come up behind her opponent. 2 more quick shots, and the combat was over. "Victory, Cadet Chen," Thrakvor announced, his voice betraying a hint of surprise. The hall fell silent. Sarah stood breathing hard, adrenaline still coursing through her system. Around the circle, alien faces showed expressions ranging from surprise to respect to concern. "How?" Zix-9 asked, its mechanical voice filled with confusion. "My calculations indicated a 97% probability of victory." Sarah lowered her weapon and looked at the mechanoid with genuine respect. "You calculated based on logic and patterns, but sometimes the illogical choice is the right choice." As she walked back to rejoin her fellow humans, Sarah could feel the weight of hundreds of alien eyes upon her. She had just proven that humanity might be smaller and weaker than most galactic species, but they brought something unique to the table. The real test, however, was yet to come.